I think the last of the community that you're taking part of, and with that being with Eden, it's our mission is to one, help build Eden to a place where we are bringing value to EOS to be able to capture and lock in basically more funding to help fund these fractals. So without going too much into all of my kind of thoughts on this, I do want to kick this off to back to Dan to talk, and then we can open up to live discussion. But one of the last points I'd like to bring up is it's exciting because I think now I'm starting to really view these fractals as ways of being project based, where you can deploy amount of EOS in a pool of funds that's going to be distributed throughout a time every single week. That community has to reach a consensus on how we're going to distribute out that pool of EOS for that week. And so I'm starting to see that projects can start to be designed around this method of token distribution based off how much the team that comes together to, I guess, propose an initiative for the fractal decides like who's going to be the heavy lifters, who are the ones that are expected to be ranked at the top to be getting the more I guess more rewards, the more pay, but also at the same time holding each other accountable by meeting weekly with the team and ranking each other. So it's just really exciting. There's a lot of potential here, and yeah. So we had our first one this Wednesday. So yeah, that's the the announcement. I'm gonna kick it back over to Dan now. Yeah. No, thank you, Doug. So I guess kind of, I think you kind of nailed it with the, we're we're taking the lead in initiative and being kind of innovative of taking the Fractally process and applying that on Eden, which is interesting because um, there's members from Eden who also aren't really involved with Fractally. So there's a crossover. We see this as a good synergy, especially with this show. The show is going to be covering topics going with everything going on in Eden. The Eden Fractal, though, I see being a thing that's going to really spark community engagement, just based off our belief of like how we see the Fractally technology integrating with Eden. But yeah, as far as I guess the Eden Town Hall show, I have been thinking, we're still a work in progress where we may name it something else, but the idea though is that we want to have a show where we're doing the highlights, but also we have a section where people's voices can be heard. And so like, right now we are just free flowing and it is more open discussion, which is awesome. Some of the things we're thinking about is, if we have like our section show for 30 minutes where that's like really, we stick to schedule and we have times where we have open discussion for the community. Maybe we plan those in ahead of time. And then afterwards, we kind of have an after party where then it's more open to other discussions and topics and then see where that goes. The main point is that we're producing content weekly so that at least we can eventually start to use this, and the content doesn't need to be edited that much because it was structured well enough to with the retention in mind to where we don't need to cut out, like, I guess you could say, like the extra fluff that happens in these
Um, yeah,
reoccurring
reoccurring
events.
events.
But
But
yeah,
yeah,
I
I
hope
hope
that
that
kind of
kind of
answers
answers
some of
some of
those
those
questions.
questions.
Um,
Um,
and
and
yeah,
yeah,
I'd
I'd
be
be
open
open
to,
to,
I
I
kind
kind
of
of
open it
open it
up
up.
as well to any other questions or comments about, the first topic of what people think about the Eden Fractal. And do you see kind of what Dan and I are kind of seeing as far as how this will kind of foster a lot of Eden engagement and activity? Because when you think about it, Eden's been really centered around just the elections when we're talking about community participation and activity, and that's now it's gone down to three every 3 months. But in between, it's still important to have weekly events because that's how we get the community stronger, and that's what some of the things that we've learned from the Fractally process. And it's cool because we're taking that process, we're applying it here on Eden, but we're doing it in a more decentralized way because to a certain extent, over on Fractally, it is centralized to Fractally LLC because they're building the software. But what we're learning, I think, here in the EOS space is we for the ENF, for example, a little bit of centralization is a good thing if you trust that centralized uh, organization to do their best to decentralize the process and make things fair. But you have to have some form of leadership to be able to push things and get things moving forward. And so that's how I kind of view Fractally as well. And so what I see here with this Eden Fractal though is an opportunity for us to be, as a community, decentralized, apply the Fractally methods and see where it goes. Like this could be like really the first true completely decentralized, finding the leaders within this Eden Fractal to lead the initiatives and see where it goes from there. So yeah, I'd be curious to hear any questions or comments on this topic. If anyone would like to hop in.
Yeah, I'll jump in. So I think it's interesting. So I guess I'm guessing, Douglas, you probably you weren't around when Eden first started, so you kind of missed that origin story. And it's interesting. So Eden came around. It was proposed prior to the ENF being a thing. So it was in basically May of last year was the first election, trial election. And at the time, Eden was basically this. It was kind of a work proposal system. In the end, it was the only funding means within the ecosystem that was going to be for projects. Like, this is where you've heard the debate about, is Eden selecting projects or people? And the reason why is because originally it was for projects. It was going to be a form of a WPS, and at the end, whoever you would pick people to take the money and invest in a project that would benefit EOS. That was the original sort of purpose. I think where we've gotten to now, we've stepped back. We think, okay, that was great at the time, but now there's a bunch of means of acquiring capital for projects. Pomelo, huge. The grant framework, 2 announcements today of 2 more proposals, 2 more grants that went out there. And the ENF is the work through the work proposals, or sorry, the working groups. Like, there's capital going out to do projects. So I think Eden, we should deliberately not focus on projects anymore. Like, I think that is being solved in this space. So then it's like, okay, well, what are we here to do? Like, I love that we're getting together to talk, and I think it's great you guys are doing those Wednesday meetings, but I still think those are sort of devoid of a purpose. And I guess it kind of contradicts what you're saying, Felix, about let's just see where it goes. I don't think that's a good strategy. I mean, I just think that's not, humans don't, like, if you go back, like, we worked in a tribe way back when, like, our evolution was tribal. That wasn't just see where it goes. It was like, you're working together, and traditionally for the purpose of surviving, right? So, but it wasn't just an ad hoc free-form thing. Like, I think we will be more functional as a group of people if we have a really clear focus of what we're focusing on. So I'd like to propose that we make it all about selecting leaders, and for leadership and a way to do democracy, getting after what Russell Brand's looking for, right? Like, when he speaks to, we need a new way to do democracy, it's a new way to pick leadership, to govern our community, to have a unified voice that represents the people. That's the Eden process. That's what More Equal Animals talks about. Let's ditch the work proposal focus, and let's start to really focus Eden on this leadership piece, selecting for leaders. And then it begs the question, what do the leaders do? What are we leading, right? And I think that's where we've got to find a way to integrate Eden, global Edens, because it can't just be the Genesis, into EOS governance somehow. I don't know how, but I think that's the solution. Personally, I'm trying to, I think, suggest. And I think for the next trial, the next actual election, I'm going to try to put forward a bit of a pitch where people who want to participate in this take the CD funds, if they make it to a CD, and put it into a pool to run Eden as an org for this leadership purpose, and kind of get rid of the idea of we each get a little pocket of money to do individual projects, because I don't think that's really working yet. I think we can do more. Anyway, I'll stop.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. Real quick, I guess, to comment on kind of like seeing where it goes. What I mean by that is, like, so basically what's different about this versus Fractally is we now have, and I mean, we'll see how that goes as far as, like, right now Dan has, and we've gotten Chief. So Dan Singjoy, Patrick from Nova Crypto, and then I know Chuck McDonald has also entertained the idea of funding, a weekly, like, funding a pool of EOS to be distributed for these Fractally meetings, or these Eden Fractal meetings that we're going to be having. When I say, I guess what I mean when I say, like, we'll see where it goes, is I think it's interesting because now it's different. We're coming, like, there's more incentivization, if that's a word, of now there's money on the line. So now the community is going to, like, the community that comes to these Fractal events, we're going to be deciding how to distribute that money based off the contributions towards Eden, and which ones have been, which contributions are valued in the community. And I think that in itself, is what's going to help drive and find Eden's mission and purpose. And then that's where I also start to see that now other fractals could form, because I just think that this is a great way to distribute money, because you're allowing the community to decide how to distribute that money based off the weekly contributions that people say they're going to do. And then if they fulfill it, through every weekly discussions, I think things can start to structure in a business sense where, like I said, if you're thinking of, like, if a Fractal is initiative led to make a project, and you come up with, okay, I think, this project would require this amount of funds with this amount of team, but it's going to be distributed throughout a time. And then this team, though, you can start to organize a team saying that, okay, well, we know that this team is going to be the ones that's going to be carrying like the heavier workload, right? So they're the ones that we're expecting to be ranking at the top part, and those people are also expecting that as well because that's how much payment that they need to make it their worthwhile.
Yeah.
If they're not delivering on what they say, then that might go to somebody else who sees an opportunity to pick up the slack
Yeah.
and gain more respect. And so it is interesting. We're also in a very, experimental phase. We're just getting started, but I do see this fractal process being applied to Eden on top as another layer to help distribute funds from
I guess that's my
delegates and
point.
chief delegates who wants to kind of support these initiatives, because I think this will start to build a reputation around delegates and chief delegates of who's really best utilizing the funds. And if we have delegates and chief delegates really being smart about, okay, I'm going to employ this amount of EOS towards this initiative of a fractal. If that fractal delivers, that's going to help the delegate look well as well going into reoccurring elections. And I guess that's just kind of how I'm envisioning this playing out.
Yeah, I get how the mechanism works, and it's totally rational. I'm just saying there's no point. It's like you're judging value for what? Like, what is Eden achieving? What is it doing? What are we individually, decentralized fashion doing? For what purpose? That's the point. It's kind of what Douglas Bootner's saying. Like, there is no true, really compelling mission or vision. So yeah, we're all going to do stuff on a weekly meeting, get paid for it. Makes perfect sense. What are we doing though? Why are we doing the work? What is the purpose? What's the net value?
Right.
Is that the best use of funds? I don't think so. Again, and it's also, you're talking about a worker proposal system. I'm saying, yeah, that's great, have that. But that's not what Eden should be about, I don't think, anymore. Like, it shouldn't just be a thing that we're just trying to do a worker proposal system, because that's like great, but it's not. We could do more.
Chris, I want to just say that I really, really, really love what you said about leadership, because really that's what I see as a quintessential need. Not just one leader, but teaching people how to be leaders. And this combined with Brock Pierce's feedback over the very necessary role that we, as people who are committed to the adoptance of blockchain technologies in a way that is healthy for society, need to educate the leaders of our nations and the policymakers and decision makers. And so for me, I really feel as though whoever is going to lead EOS in the future must do so by curating and assembling the best information available. And if there's a conflict over what that is, creating a way to have a dialogue that's healthy and to find resolution to where all these different stakeholders can come to a mutual benefit. So that's sort of like how I see it. With what Dan and Felix are doing here is it's to me, they're just saying this is the best way that we feel like leading, and we're going to use this, methodology, which I don't necessarily, I don't have anything against, and I'm pretty interested in participating with, because it's novel. But by no means do I feel as though I want to vest the entire membership of Eden or EOS into anything. I want people to be able to choose for themselves. And I've heard Dan Larimer himself say a lot about what did he call it? Parallel development or multi-threaded not just the programs, but even our social structures and the way we think that all these different things can be done, and then we can reconvene and see what works best. So that's my sort of perspective on it. I don't really know what's best right now in this situation, but I really resonate, Chris, with a lot of what you said.
Yeah, and to me, I get where you're coming from too, Chris. Like, the value that's being created as of right now, you could say is not much, but at the same time, it's progress. Though it's like these initiatives, like that will form through these weekly, like, events. Like, for example, what Dan and I are bringing, like, those are our contributions towards this Eden Fractal, and kind of putting this together. But this is also helping make people more aware. There's value in that. And so I do agree with what Doug is saying. Like, yeah, we shouldn't dump all of the treasury into just one idea. But that's what I think is exciting about this fractal is we're going to be able to build respect and get a metric to measure members in the Eden community based off their interaction and participation in weekly events that are centered around Eden. As of right now, we don't have anything that is really bringing us together other than the elections weekly. So now when we start to have, things that incentivize people to come, whether that being NFTs, actual EOS, the Eden token that we're essentially minting a distribution for, I think that's going to be a way to test things. And I think I don't know. It's going to be interesting. I'm excited. But yeah, it is great feedback, and I do get where you're coming from, and I think time will tell as things progress. But
yeah, I should clarify something, because I'm not trying to suggest that you guys shouldn't do those Wednesday meetings. I'm going to join you. Like I think I'm being misunderstood, because I think that's a great means to pay people. The bigger point I'm trying to bring up is, what are we paying people generally to do? So you mentioned like creating value. It's true, value is created, but it doesn't exist in a vacuum. Like, it has to be value towards something. Like what is the value? Like so, and I think what the value can be is, if we all aligned about a greater purpose for Eden, this community, what are we trying to do? Then there's an implicit direction to push value towards. Do you see what I mean? Like, it focuses the value creation to a point. It's almost like a magnifying glass. It gets more powerful if you can focus it all. So, and I think what we can try to do is, let's turn Eden into this model organization of a means to, like what Chuck was trying to do. Him and Dominic, we're going to create a DApp, essentially, that you can launch your own DAO using the quote unquote Eden fractal democracy process. So let's do that. Let's do that as an org, but then use this process ourselves to select leaders to do something. Because the other thing to keep in mind is, like, any organization that wants to use this process is going to have a separate focus. Like, they're going to have their own reason to want to utilize this process to select for leaders to do something within their org, which could do all sorts of things, right? So ours org happens to be one that uses this process to select for leaders that does something within EOS. Like, we tie it back to EOS, and that's where I think there's still a break. We don't have that connection yet. We have nothing that really gives us influence over EOS. And I think I don't know. So that's kind of does that make more sense? Where if we could have that focus, then when you do your Wednesday meetings, it's like, okay, how did you add value to Eden with the intention of creating this DApp creator and creating and whatever our influence is within EOS, how are we progressing that? Is it media? Is it content? And it gives more focus instead of just sort of being semi-random.
Oh yeah, that makes more sense, and I agree, Chris. I think, I think I talked about it a little bit on last week, but what I'm also interested in seeing how this plays out is, like, during these weekly meetings on Wednesday, like, after we have assigned our respect within that the community, like, I like the after discussion, right? Because I think the after discussion is just as important, because the community needs to start to decide, like, okay, well, what direction are we wanting to go? Right now, we're open to all contributions, right? Anyone who's wanting to contribute can come and they can share their contributions. The community is going to decide what we think is more, what benefits the fractal the most. I think right now our main mission of the Eden fractal is just getting it established and help spreading the fractal governance ideas and methods, and however, whatever contributions are, like, the most valuable. Like, for example, we have Vlad. He's came up with, like, a dashboard, like, or he has some ideas of, like, basically kind of starting to work and do his own software. And so there's been discussions too of, like, well, are we going to build our own software, or are we waiting for Fractally to launch theirs? And I think it can be kind of both. Like, we can have small little tools that we may be able to use. Like, even over on Fractally, we had, like, a voting tool online that I think his name's, I forgot, it was like Gore. He goes,
Yep,
yeah.
Gore.
He came up with a little system that, it's not going to be integrated in the Fractally software as of yet. It may not, but it's an idea, and it was a contribution that people found valuable. And that gives the actual, like, I think, opportunity over here on the Eden fractal, though, is these things can actually be implemented within our community if that's what the community as a whole reaches consensus as most valuable. And so I think having these weekly meetings can be structured in a sense for business of laying down milestones and expectations for, well, what are we wanting to strive for next week? What is that going to take? Does anybody want to kind of like step up and offer and say that they're going to do that, so that we can kind of hold it, if you do deliver on that, then you're going to be respected highest more than likely that following week. And if not, it doesn't have to be like, oh, why didn't you deliver? Like if things came up, we can explain it and we can get help. But it's going to be interesting because people might come with different initiatives. Some people might be doing stuff more NFT based, more content based. And then that's where I think we could start to have other fractals form. Where,
sorry, random idea. Just what about the Eden member services that Michael's trying to do, and the funding through the people who work on those is through a similar, it could be a different, but using this exact fractal process. So pay the people who are committing, and then it's like, that's like basically the measurement of value. It's what did you do for the communication part of the Eden member services, or for the technical side of Eden member services.
Yeah. No, yeah, that's something that we're hoping to get Michael on as probably a guest speaker and one of our, maybe the first chief delegate guest speaker on the show, to talk about how we can integrate his proposal with the Eden services with what's kind of taking place here with the Eden fractal. Because I've also seen this too, of like, Joshua talks a lot about the holacracy and like basically you have like different bubbles of organizations centered around certain like driven around the same type of work. So like you'd have a content media based fractal, so then contributions are ranked on who's bringing the most value within that fractal, because people can make content, right? But there's going to be there's levels to like, well, how valuable was that content? And that can be measured with, going back to what I said from the beginning of like retention, right? If you're making good content that's centered around retention and you're getting those higher numbers, you're going to be valued more, so you should get paid more. And so I think the community will end up respecting that naturally through this process. And that's just the media side of things, right? If somebody else has an idea and is working towards another project, you can have a whole pool of funds for that. And that's where now I'm starting to really start to see these fractals as ways to be, it could be a great way to potentially fund projects, because there is that accountability and transparency measurement of weekly meetings that basically anyone who funds these fractals can hold the fractals accountable for, and choose if they want to continue to fund that fractal or not. And I just see a lot of potential of fractals booming here on Eden with what we have going also on top of with delegates and chief delegates. Because my biggest thing is, I think this is going to help give us more substance when we go into the elections on who to vote for, because we don't know like if you're a member in the Eden community and you're not really in front of other people, but you may be doing a lot. How are people supposed to know what you're doing? And if you're randomized in a group with them, how are you going to be able to convince somebody to trust you in that hour? It would be great if you have some type of metric like what we have here with like an Eden token, to be able to look and you can start to see like, okay, well, they seem to have like a lot of built-in respect within the Eden community through their contributions and engagement in these Eden fractals, to where they'll have a better chance of getting elected. And then that, I think, helps with electing better, more efficient delegates to manage funding for Eden. And that's just kind of how I see it. But yeah, that's I think a great idea to explore, and hopefully we can get Michael on board with talking about the Eden member services and finding a way to integrate all of this together.
So I'd like to jump in and just say thanks so much for all of the really exciting, inspiring conversation. There's a couple of things that I'd like to touch upon, although I suppose if Chris would like to respond to it, then feel free to jump in. And also,
go ahead.
Okay, cool. Sounds good. And then also welcome to Verbal and Patrick. Great to see you here. So a few things. One, I agree with what Felix was saying and what Chris was saying about how the Fractally process and the Eden fractal and potentially other fractals could interact with the Eden member service proposal. And I'm very interested to speak with Michael and figure out how we can work together with that kind of thing. There's also different ways it can work, like just funding directly teams like Adenia and so forth, of course. But it reminded me of the article by James Mart. He wrote a really great article last October called Persistent Roles in Fractal Governance, which is basically kind of like how Felix was talking about how, like, different circles, as Michael defined in that proposal, might wind up being fractals in themselves, like an Eden marketing fractal, an Eden technical fractal, and stuff like that, maybe in the future. But that's also kind of getting further out there. I also kind of want to just go back to what Dario said a little while ago too in the chat. So Dario asked, "Is this town hall to discuss or no? I'm sorry, I'm reading the wrong thing." Dario said that his feedback is to make it clear what this show is about. So first off, thanks for the feedback, Dario. And I suppose that it might be helpful to come up with like a simple mission statement or a simple goal of this show. Like, I think basically the show is like to share like the news from Eden, all things Eden, and then discuss it with the community. So a lot of the topics that we're discussing today are related to the fractal, but of course, many of the topics are related. And then, I mean, Dario also had some interesting thoughts about how at first he thought it was kind of confusing to mix the two things with Fractally and Eden, but then Dario was also talking about how he can see how using the Fractally process to distribute funds to people helping EOS and Eden can be helpful. And so that also kind of ties into what Chris was saying too. So like one, Chris was asking before, like, what is the purpose of Eden and what are we working towards, which is of course like a very helpful thing to define. So I think that, I mean, in addition to helping EOS, another big mission that I think that we have and that's stated on the website for Eden is that Eden is a community working to maximize the power and independence of its members, thereby securing life, liberty, property, and justice for all. So like, we're all basically working to help each other and also help EOS and help fractal governance in general. Was something you want to say there, Chris?
Yeah, see, that's interesting. I hadn't thought about this, but I don't think that really should be the purpose of Eden, this organization. I think that's the purpose and the outcome of the fractal democracy process. It's like a byproduct of the process that makes that statement more true. And really, like, we have to walk before we can run type thing. Like, that is like a more long-standing goal, like securing life, liberty, and process, or life, liberty, property for all. Like, are we really doing that in Eden? Is that even possible? So many years from now in a future Eden, okay, fine, we can make an argument from that. Is it feasible and realistic and pragmatic to say that that's an intention we want for the next couple months or a year? No, I don't think so. I think we need to get more precise. Again, it's this idea of a magnifying glass. We've got all these great shining lights, but we're just light bulbs going off in the distance. We need to like collect. And I think we need to focus more on the mantra of 1 + 1 = 3. Like, that's the philosophy I think we should laser in on, not that life, liberty, property, justice for all.
3. 1 + 1 = 3. What?
Yes.
You haven't read.
Yes.
I'm guessing you haven't read Michael
I'm
Animal's
listening. I'm listening carefully.
Yeah, so it's the better analogy then, if that's better, is the light bulbs. So you've got all this light radiating in any direction, but if you put a magnifying glass in front of that, you ended up with a concentrated point. So that's the analogy of 1 + 1 = 3. If you have two people equal 1 and they're just pushing in different directions, that's not as powerful as two people equaling 1 pushing in the same direction. They can accomplish more with the sum of their parts.
Our sum is greater than our parts. Okay.
Correct. Yeah, it's just an analogy. It's just an analogy focusing on the idea of if we work together collectively in a unified goal, we would be far more accomplished.
Okay, I got it.
Yeah, and the analogy is very common in places like complex systems, which this is, where you have basically emergent properties, things coming together to interact. You get an emergent property, and that's the extra one that comes from the two individual ones.
Right. Yep.
Well,
Exactly.
I want to say something here. I'm new to like open source development in blockchain communities, like as of 2022 this year, and I don't really understand. Like, the thing that confuses me is, like, I think of like businesses, either like for profit or nonprofit, and they have a fiscal responsibility. and a very clearly defined mechanism of establishing value and compensating people with value, which is called the dollar bill. And so to me, it's sort of like a business that's for profit fails if it doesn't figure out the solution to the question of what am I doing? What is my value proposition? How do I go about doing this? Because if there's no profit, then the business has to keep putting in money to keep it going till it can get profitable. And then with a nonprofit, you know, sometimes you have nonprofits that operate ineffectively or inefficiently or not fulfilling their mission or purpose, and some, yes, are used for money laundering mechanisms and whatever. But more and more, it's sort of like nonprofits are very getting more clear about what it is that they're doing and how do they go about measuring what the thing of value that they're trying to achieve. So when I hear people talking about metrics in relation to, say, influencing, I sort of laugh, because it's like that's all I think about all the time is, you know, what is the best methodology for our dollar to get value out of the communication that we use or do, and is any of it sensible? The way I look at it is there's some aspect to what Chris is trying to establish of like what is the value that we're creating, and here's the things that are valuable to me. Maybe we could, like, if I can eat and put food on the table, that's a value. If I have, you know, some sort of home over my head, well, that's a value. I think a lot of people could agree on that. And so there's a certain kind of bottom line of like, I want to see a mechanism be created in which this value generation is not fluff, but it's actually doing something to solve my real needs, if not giving me employment and a wage, bringing some sort of added value to my life that can be very definitely qualified and quantified. Even things as intangible as social interaction, like having a system of metrics to define these things as, are these worthy topics to address or try to solve, and you know, and then how do we go about measuring these things and the impacts of what efforts we take, what's our return on investment. And so for me, it's sort of like I'm just as confused as everyone else here trying to come to the solution to this question of what is value, how do we define it. But I think that we all have different angles and perspectives of the pieces of the puzzle to answer that question. But what I'm concerned about is there a space and a mechanism for that dedicated discussion, and that can involve stakeholders across different EOSIO ecosystems? And is Chris Barnes interested in the notion of, just like in real political parties, like people plan and campaign well before the election? They don't just show up to a meeting thinking they're not going to run for election and get elected. So I'm interested in bringing as like to the table some sort of independent effort that leads towards a consensus direction that can then be officially adopted, but sort of exists outside of all the formal structures of having to make real decisions. I don't even know if that makes sense. It sort of coming out of what I really feel like the hackathon should be, which is an ideathon. And what are the best ideas that EOS can embrace to lead us into the future that have, you know, long-standing, you know, something that we're not going to change like bylaws, but just really, what are we all doing here? What is this all about?
Yeah.
So,
You want to go, Dan?
well, sure. I'll just respond quickly, Doug. First off, some of the things you were saying there remind me a lot about the first part of the sentence I mentioned before about how Eden is a community working to maximize the power and independence of its members. Like you were talking about the tangible benefits of, you know, helping in your life and so forth, and then also like the Eden process, and especially when we do it on a weekly basis, how that can provide a lot of like social relationships and so forth. So there's a lot you said there, but that's something that I did think was interesting, and also I think might help provide the magnifying glass that Chris was talking about. I'd be interested to hear his thoughts about that. Like, I feel like when we're showing up for meetings, whether it's 6 months or 3 months or every week, even better, when we're all working together to help each other and to maximize the power and independence of each other. Like that provides us with a pretty precise and granular objective, and that's something that when we repeat the process often and we're using a consensus process to rank that and then like distribute both value that people can use to pay for things that they need, and then also like quantified respect or a more precise measurement for leadership, and like Felix was saying, to determine how apt people are to lead, then I feel like that's really helpful to maximize the power and independence and also give us direction, and then also provide that leadership in addition to that funding. But I know Felix is going to say something too, so I'm interested to hear what Felix is going to say and also about responses to that as well.
Yeah, so I guess I feel like on the local level of like what we're trying to do, I think every person has their own I guess personal goal, and um it's going to be led by their own initiatives, and that's what I think collectively though, that what the main goal for Eden to bring, like, I think everyone can find value if Eden is bringing in qualitative membership, to where you're not just bringing in somebody and then they're not going to participate or engage in the community and bring any type of contributions. That's just a number, and that's not qualitative. And having discussions like this week to week is building relationships, connections, a community, and that to me is of value. And that it may be very little value. Like you can't, as of right. I mean, with technically with our EOS, right? That is a little bit. You could buy something with it, right? Up until now, we've been doing a lot of sweat equity, a lot of like charitable work towards the cause. But now we're starting to get, some actual, real, you could say tangible incentives to participate and contribute in the community. And so, having ideathons to me is very interesting too, because these ideas can be great ideas, and if they're backed by trial funding through pools that lock into fractals that are going to have basically a distribution life span, to see how well these people who come up with these ideas are able to lead and act on these ideas too. That's very important also. So I just think on the local level, what we're doing here with this show, the mission is to cover the highlights and activity that's going on, and starting to, I think, really, what I want to do with this show is start to grow and make this an accountability too. We're going to be discussing highlights with going on in the fractals, potential more than one fractal, but right now with this fractal, what's going on with the chief delegate meetings, what people are saying, and following up, and then an opening discussion to see what the community thinks and feels, and engage sentiment. And I think I do think it's really important that we really do start to build a reputation within this community when you're wanting to run as a delegate and potentially chief delegate in these Eden elections. So I just think that is value, because we're bringing that to light. We're bringing attention to it, and so now people can become a little bit more informed going into elections. And it's interesting how Doug brings up, because I have thought about that as well, as people basically campaigning before these elections. And what better way to campaign by actually showing up and doing your contributions within the community and earning the respect, instead of just saying and coming with a list of things that you said, but if no one can back it, then how valuable is that? And I think that's the value that we're essentially capturing by holding these Eden fractals.
On the campaigning bit, I think that absolutely has to happen. And what I'm going to try to do, so, thinking of Eve and what he's done with the ENF and EOS. Eve had a vision, still has it, brought together key stakeholders, and he's now got the buy-in from those who he needed buy-in from, and he's executing on that vision. Eden needs to do a similar process. I think we can. I am. It can. It's objective to me that what the ENF doing is absolutely positive. So I think we should do something similar. I think we should crowdsource a bit of a bigger mission. It's what Douglas Bootner's been talking about. And I'm going to take a crack at something similar to this. And if you get enough people in an election who are willing to get behind that idea and they all run on it, we haven't really had that yet. We haven't had a set of CDs because there hasn't been enough elections to really test it, but a set of CDs who are all actually unified around one focus. Right now, that's still been individualized. They come together and the focus has been whatever the mission statement, value for EOS. That's fine. That's very broad though, right? So I think the idea here would be get a few folks campaigning on the same purpose and see if they can make it, if they can get the community buy-in and have enough representation of that idea as a chief delegate. And I think that's the signal from the community that, yeah, that's a good idea. Run with that vision. Let's make that happen. And I think that's pooling of resources, using the resources to build out Eden as a system, as a function that we're using that process of the Eden political playoff for EOS, and then use these member services with weekly fractal meetings to pay people. It seems like there's a nice way to marry all this together. We're just missing that kind of overarching purpose. And it takes away from this idea that it's just supposed to be a random fractal and it just will all bubble up to the top. I just think we need to, like, sure, okay. And then why not that idea bubble up from the top from unifying community members who have a shared focus. So yeah, we shall campaign.
Thanks for that insight, Chris. That was awesome.
Yeah, it's gonna be exciting. Things are gonna. The price of crypto in general is down, but I don't even look at that anymore. It's just the amount of development that's happening in the EOS ecosystem, the Eden ecosystem now. This stuff was not happening years before, and for the longest time we've all held on to EOS because we knew what the technology could do, but we just didn't have the development. And so right now, yeah, we're in, what Mark Shear said, this is exploratory, and we're all kind of figuring out the landscape together, and it is interesting. I think it's going to be a mix of everything, right? And that's what's beautiful about, I think, this community too, is like we're all aligned with the principles and values of reaching consensus and the importance of hearing each other, hearing everyone's point of view and taking that into consideration. So with anything, there's not going to be just one right way to do it, and there's going to be a mix of ways to do it, and being able to reach consensus on it through our processes and doing it weekly, I think, is also important too, because now we're ingraining it into like how we foresee and do things in our lives, but then we're also spreading that idea upon to others, and that that feeds into the mission of Eden, which is spreading a free democracy, a way to get to a place where we're not in a corrupted democracy, and we can have more levels of accountability and transparency. So yeah, exciting times for sure. I guess if anyone else has any comments on this subject.
I'd like to say a few things. Very interesting input from everybody, and I feel like there is a consensus. There is. I feel like people are all touching the same elephant, different parts of the same elephant, right? That analogy, where there's, let's say, 6 blind men touching different parts of the elephant. Chris, I agree that we should be focusing, and if we have a choice in this particular case, focusing on improving the governance, and I think that's a valid design principle. That's a valid thing to follow. I also think it's interesting to kind of keep things in some ways open, which I think has been what Felix was saying, to some degree open, because it is early. But those things obviously need to be balanced. And Doug is also right in that ultimately this has to manifest in people earning a living. And when that starts to happen, then we primed the pump, and this thing will now begin to feed itself in a virtuous cycle, and we're off. We've done it. When that starts to happen, when that complete cycle starts to happen, and people are actually paying their own bills, they are going to be grabbing the necks of their friends and dragging them in and saying, "Listen, this is something. We've got to get there." I want to make one correction, Chris, on the history of what Eves did. I don't see him. I didn't see what he did as a garnering political power or political. I don't think he did it by campaigning. He did it by the fact that he was appointed by the block producers, and he represented money. So I don't think that we should rewrite that history.
I didn't rewrite it. He did campaign to block producers. I don't think the definition of a campaign means it has to be public and open to everyone. He campaigned to those who needed to get to 15 of 21.
He campaigned to block producers.
That's
to
right.
the block producers.
Who represent the people who vote for them with their tokens.
Yeah, but we all know the fault in logic in that.
I think
go on, do we? I
not
don't think we all do.
campaigning
Go ahead, clarify.
publicly is where I think you're.
He campaigning to block producers. The block producers chose him, and the DPoS is broken because the coins are stuck on exchanges, and those block producers, we don't know how many of them, who they are, and who they truly represent. And that very fact, hang on, let me finish.
Okay.
That very fact that the community is not facing, that very salient fact is the root of why I believe we're going in the wrong direction. Not in terms of Fractally and Eden. I'm very happy about all of that. But the focus on marketing and yield at the expense of innovation and utility.
And so you think that would be solved? That would be solved if Eve was selected via what you would consider to be the community, not those who have left their tokens on exchanges, but the other community, which are hard to find. Do you think we'd be going in a different direction?
Yeah, absolutely. I think
the yield is awesome. The yield plus is wicked. I'm glad they're doing that to take token inflation and put it towards TVL incentive. So what would be done differently if it was? I'd be the community who's. Go ahead.
I think that's where we disagree, and I think that's where we got off the rails, and that's how all of crypto got off the rails, and that's the source of why Luna got off the rails, and that's why we're going to get punished by the regulators. We are being sent into the eye of the storm, and to get to the eye of the storm, you got to go through the storm. We are being sent directly into a hell with all of that.
What would you define? How would you qualify what we're currently experiencing then? If the future is hell and it involves a higher
this is mild.
How much worse could it get?
Oh, bad, real bad. That's what I think. Actually, I would have to chime in and agree with what was just said, because I'm a big student of history and finance and usury and how it has played out historically. And to me, the whole notion of what was just brought up makes me beg the question of why was it that there was a announcement notification I received this morning for the Yield Plus premiere video at 11 a.m. Central Standard Time at the same exact time that the Eden Town Hall meeting that is not very as well publicized is just starting. Isn't that like something that's going to conflict where you can't choose to do both? And does someone not realize that, or does someone realize that?
Clutching for straws. It's recorded on YouTube. You can watch it later. What does it matter? It's not a live thing you can interact with.
Well, no. I don't know. I just thought it was funny that it happened to be at the same time.
I think what was more funny was when
discussing it on EOS, and it did draw down any interest in this group. I think that's a fair comment.
You can't.
I
You guys
mean,
are totally out
so
to lunch. If you're saying that they did it on purpose, we're gonna fuck those Eden guys. We're gonna take away from their
No,
audience.
no, 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 no. I'm not
Hey,
saying
we
that.
weren't
Listen,
doing that.
hold on.
That's what you're suggesting.
That's not
Well,
something
Chris,
that I'm saying.
I'll go a lot farther than that.
Maybe don't go a lot farther than that, because I feel like that's getting kind of into like conspiracy territory,
I won't do it here.
and also some
I
of
won't do it
the.
here. I
Do
won't
you mind
do
if I
it
speak here, Perry, first?
Chris, I won't do it here, but I'll tell you, it goes a lot farther than that.
So
And-
Perry,
and-
some of the things that
Okay, I'll take your word for it, but
and so I guess that, you know, this is really interesting conversation, for sure, and it does fall into a place where, you know, some can say it's speculation. It really kind of, I guess, goes down to everyone's due diligence of how deep they've gone down the rabbit hole on these issues. My personal opinion and take on what I think is going on is, so I brought this up with Fractally, right? Fractally, the Fractally fractal is centralized to a certain extent around Fractally, around Dan Larimer and the Fractally team. There's a community though that we trust, that the Fractally team is going to do things in the best interest of the community to decentralize things to where things are fair. And my viewpoint so far is, yes, I agree. I think, you know, you know, Eves took an initiative when EOS needed it. So it's hard to say anything negative about the approach he did. He did what he had to do. Now, I also see where Perry's coming from as far as like, why wasn't this publicly campaigned to give a chance for other people to realize, hey, we're campaigning the block producers now, like maybe we should have others. But I think with Eden taking the initiative of saying like, hey, we're going to vote for the ENF president. So this happened in one of the chief delegate meetings. I think that's a good way for Eden to position itself. What's also very nice about Eden having its own token is it allows the flexibility to move if worst case scenario things went south. My goal is to be able to synergize everything and work together collectively, and we'll see how things play out. And like I said, this conversation is very interesting because I do sometimes think deep about what EOS could potentially really truly be, and it's super exciting. It can be kind of scary too, but you know, that kind of does fall into a thing of like, well, I'm also just, these are just thoughts in my head. I mean, yes, I've gone deep in some of those thoughts, but like, you know, there's a whole lot I still don't know to claim something I don't feel comfortable with. But, you know, putting those ideas out there is good to have those conversations. You know, I do like hearing these things because, you know, you don't hear other people talking about these points. Edgar got a lot of like heat for bringing up some stuff about block producers. And, you know, I think we can do only what we can do right now, and participating in Eden, I think just being transparent and working together with everybody is the best way to go about it. And that, I guess that's just kind of my opinion on that, but I don't know.
Well, I completely understand that there's a strategy to ignoring all of that, but there's also something that is compelling, and it'll become more clear, I believe, as time goes on, especially beyond all the money spent in September at a conference, when we come to realize that the focus on marketing and yield are short-term bumps, and the thing that's actually going to attract the developers who know what the hell's going on, right? If anybody knows, they know what the hell's going on, and they're going to make their own life decisions. They're going to look at their own family and decide really they're going to take a hard look, and they're going to see through it. And that's why we're struggling. That's the reason why we're struggling, and that's why people are leaving. And so
Perry,
Would you?
I don't agree with a lot of things you're saying. First of all, I don't think that we're struggling. There's not a lot of people who are leaving. There's a lot of people who are in the community and have been around for a while. You know, people left over the past few years, but I feel like now the community is probably more in a growth stage, like with people like Doug joining, although it's still a slow growth stage. And like we're really like, as far as my experience, I'm speaking with a lot of people who are, I would say, thriving or like on the cusp of thriving, like people who are doing really exciting things. And I think that your perspective about how yield and marketing focusing on that isn't helpful. I don't agree with that. I mean, I think that yield and marketing help spur innovation, and a lot of
You
people
need them
behind
both.
the
You
Yield
need them
Plus
both.
initiative are working with Eden. And then Chuck also shared some really interesting ideas about how Eden NFTs can work with the Eden
Yeah,
Fractal, with the Yield Plus, and so forth.
you
So
need marketing as well as manufacturing. They are yin and yang. There's no question about that. You can't have a business that doesn't market, and you can't have well, you can actually, but you can't have it with something that doesn't build something of value. Let's take
right.
Tesla. Let's take Tesla for an example. There is zero marketing at Tesla and all of Elon's businesses. What does that tell you? The
Well, I'm not
richest
sure
man
if
in
that's
the world.
true. I just watched a big conference where there's lots of marketing for Tesla.
Can I say something, guys?
Sure, Patrick.
I
Good to
am
hear
here
from you.
since a while, hearing the talks of everybody, and I just want to say here that I am very happy to see this initiative by Joshua Seymour empowering the Eden. I am very happy to have jump into this Eden Fractal with Dogman and Felix. That was naturally for me because I want to collaborate. That's the keywords 2022 and beyond. It's about to collaboration, doing the things between the circles. And sure, you can be independent, be a very strong entrepreneur, like mindset, like Yves Larose, or others like EOS Support with Randall Roland, Dario Cesaro, and Bishop, very entrepreneurial. And we should be independent. That's very important. But at the same time, we need more collaboration than ever. And it's not only about marketing, focus on the marketing or focus on the governance. That's a spectrum. So I say societal, economical, and technological because that's the only ecosystem that we have blockchain-based that is able to address that. You see at other blockchain-based ecosystem, they have not these components that we have us. So it's very encouraging to have Eden, Onios, a vetted, trusted people, a human layer. That's very encouraging. Or
Looks like you dropped out, Patrick. But real quick, I guess hop back in when you get your thing fixed. But I guess really quick to discuss a couple points. Just to clarify too, like, I think what Yves is doing is great. Like I respect a lot the hustle and like the initiatives that he's leading. I remember a time when the ENF was first being announced, it was confusing too because like we had Eden going, so we were all kind of under the assumption that Eden was going to work with the block producers to basically Eden was going to be the ENF, but it wasn't. We didn't have like I guess the structure in place yet, and so Eden took the initiative Yves took the initiative to establish the ENF, and everything he's doing is helping EOS rate. Like I see in the future, it's like, and I think here in September, I'm hoping to really expect to see, an increase in the price of EOS, and that helps this community, like not just the EOS community, but the Eden community, because our treasury is in EOS. And
what do you think Dan did? What do you think Dan did to garner $4 billion?
but sorry, it's not
could
about
you-
one man. You are only focused on Yves Larose and other people by name it them. You have not to be focused just on one person. You have to be focused on what you believe doing right and going into forward and not looking about other people doing the things. We are here doing nice proposals. We want to collaborate more. If we are only focused on one man, we will have a problem in some months because we will be very disappointed, very
Patrick,
disappointed.
allow me to clarify. I'm definitely not focusing on one man.
I don't speak about you, Grappa.
Patrick, let him finish really quick.
I don't speak about you, Grappa. You speak a lot, Grappa. You speak with your vision, with your eyes. I say here to have a broader spectrum. Don't be focused only on
Hey,
one
all
man.
right.
It's very
Real
important.
quick, I just had to take mod control. Let's like, I'm gonna have to mute people when we interrupt. So I'm gonna continue this discussion. Just heads up though, when a conversation gets passed, if I feel like you're interrupting, I'm gonna do my best to try to make it fair. So if I mute you, it just means that you interrupted and you gotta let the other person finish their point. So Perry, you were talking. You want to continue on your thought, and then I'm gonna unmute you, Patrick, but please don't interrupt. And then I'll let you say your piece, and then let's bounce this back and forth, but no interrupting, please.
Yeah, I definitely don't want to have my argument diminished into that I am focusing on Dan like a rock star. It's the opposite. Dan represents principles. Dan represents innovation. Dan represents a track record of innovation. Dan has a number of records. He has created a record of focusing on innovation and creating value. Those are principles. Those are ideas. Versus the focus on marketing and yield. Now, in the end, you need them both. You need all those things. I'm not saying that the idea of yield is wrong at all. And I'm certainly not saying that marketing as an idea is wrong. What I am saying, though, is that the primary focus needs to be on the creation of value, of creation of utility. And from there, you have something to market. But just the marketing of we're now selling the little food we have for our family. That's our sales pitch. That's the big marketing. We're just going to divide the pie into smaller slices. That's not where our focus needs to be as a community. It needs to be on the creation of utility. And the fact that we shunned the greatest source of that in our own community, and arguably one of the greatest in the crypto at large, and when you include what he's doing in governance, possibly the world, is a reflection of a value system, not a person, a value system that in my mind is out of balance. So thank you for allowing me to finish that point. It's an important point.
Okay. Yeah, no problem, Perry. I guess my one question is, so do you feel that the money spent on the Token 2049 event is that kind of, am I right into saying that like you not really for that amount of
I've heard that they don't have enough money for Dan. Okay, so if that's the case, the fact that Dan is gone, and then a marketing event where we're going to fly a bunch of people out and make them famous, put them on panels, right? And so we have that's the choice. I'll take Dan. Now there's going to be a little bump in September, no question about it. You can't spend a bunch of money and not get a bump. We're going to get it. But it's the difference between feeding your child sugar and a balanced meal.
Hey, Perry, do you think Dan should provide itemized quotes like anyone else in the community, expecting community funds to fund their initiatives? Or do you think he, because of his stature and just whatever you might think about him, he doesn't have to do that? He should just get funded based on the idea.
I was not part of that dialogue, but I can tell you that however it happened, that he's out and Zach is in, Zach and marketing are in, and yield is in, is the wrong direction.
You didn't answer the question though, and it's an easy one. Do you think someone like Dan should be obliged to provide a formal, itemized, properly scoped quote to receive community funding, or do you think he should have special privileges?
Did Eves and ENF do that before they received control of the money?
You don't want to answer that question, eh?
Answered it with a question.
That's not answering the question.
Well, yeah. Can you answer
Do
mine?
that? Probably, yeah. He probably did to the BPs who gave him the authority to do what he's doing.
He didn't to the community.
Well,
And-
your
and we've
definition of
already-
community
we've
is
already
the same. See, this is the
established-
thing. Community is an elusive term. You use it as a defense mechanism, as a word that means something.
Well,
Because it's
the-
like
the
saying,
BPs
do it
are
for the
not
kids.
community.
It's like, sure, no shit. But that doesn't, he did speak to part of the community. That's
The
like, just,
BPs
this
are
wasn't,
not
it didn't meet your
community.
definition of the community. That's all.
Well, the BPs are not the community. And I
Says
think
you.
we all,
I
we
think
all
you're wrong.
understand
Says
why-
you. Aaron
So-
Cox, Gray
Says
Mass.
my
that's a community
EOS
member.
vote, says my EOS vote, and a lot of people who aren't on the payroll of ENF.
Yeah, you're allowed to vote that way. That's exactly your privilege to do that, and you can do that. But back to the question, I've answered yours now. Your question with a question. Do you think Dan, regardless of what he's done in the past, this is like future talk. In the future, regardless of anything that's happened, should he, when making a proposal that requests community funding, give a itemized, scoped out proposal, like we see in the grant framework from the ENF? It's very clear what the
I don't think
milestones are. I
ENF,
think he should have to.
I think the fact that ENF is deciding.
Okay, so you still won't answer it. That's interesting. That speaks to your perspective,
Well,
Perry, because you're being somewhat irrational.
Let me
The fact that you
let
won't-
me answer it. Allow
Um,
me to answer. Allow me to answer the question.
Sure, go ahead.
The fact that the proposal was coming from ENF to Dan after Dan clearly knows what happened and how ENF gained its power, it has to be taken into the calculation of that question. Now, if Dan was presenting to truly a DPOS where people were actually voting and it was truly reflecting token holders, my expectation is Dan would be doing whatever he needed to do to make that happen. But I think Dan understands the war that is underfoot. He understands the war. He's not talking about it explicitly, but
So-
he understands the war, and he wasn't going to play that game.
So, guys, if I may here, I think it might be helpful to bring it back to Eden and bring it back to actionable steps that we can do as a community rather than focusing on what happened in the past with Dan, Eves, and so forth. So, like, for example, yesterday, I actually spoke with Dan. I was in a Fractally room with Dan, and I shared what we're doing with the Eden Fractal. And we also talked about quite a bit at the end of the Fractally meeting, after party. We talked about it for like an hour or so, and Dan was very enthusiastic about the Eden Fractal. He suggested forming mutual respect between the Eden Fractal and the Fractally Genesis Fractal. So regardless what happened in the past, and I think we could speculate a lot about what happened in the past, but we don't know. We can't really take action upon it. But we, as the Eden community, all of us in this room now, like, we have an opportunity to do what we think is best, independently of what the ENF is doing or what Dan is doing, and so forth, using the tools that we have. And these are helping and working with EOS and ENF and Dan, but also, like, we can focus on the little things that we can do to help. And I think that's probably best to do rather than trying to speculate on the past.
I'm happy to respond in that way. Thank you. My constructive criticism is that we rectify that problem by placing Eden in the position of power over ENF, over Fractally, and Eden is actually the elected delegates of Eden are actually making those decisions, not Eves. That's my constructive criticism, is that we drive everything towards that goal.
Yeah, and I think at least, that's kind of where I mean, that's my vision. I think, and I agree. I think that would be a good vision to collectively have. And my hopes and beliefs too are, I like to give everyone the benefit of the doubt, and actions also speak a lot to me. And I think we're in a good situation. I like, Dan can do what he has the flexibility of not having to come and ask to innovate and create, because with innovation you need to have that flexibility and freedom, and he can do that with Fractally and the Fractally process, and the ENF can continue doing what they're doing, and as long as the ENF, which they have made that a point of eventually shifting it over to like we're still trying to discover if Eden can take off and become and handle that type of responsibility. But yeah, no, I agree. I think that is a strong message, because Eden right now, as of right now, of how we're discussing the potential, has the potential to be the most democratic way to run and govern a cryptocurrency. And yeah, I think these are all great points, and fascinating discussion to have. So yeah, Dan, do you?
It's a difficult one. I realize that, but it is a necessary one, and I fear that we will flounder until we address it, one way or the other. We don't have to talk about the past if we are actually making progress towards that. But if we aren't, I guarantee you, I will make that clear. I will make that crystal clear.
Okay, cool.
Okay,
Yeah,
can
no,
I
I look forward. That's accountability, and that's awesome. It's good to have multiple insights, because I feel like what we are doing right here, these are the first steps to to us as a community, right? We don't have a single chief delegate here. No, I think we have delegates here, right? But no one with like, and even you can even argue chief delegates doesn't have much weight right now, right? But we are the community, and that to me is super powerful. Is the community is the voice, and we decide collectively and reaching consensus and having engagement and interactions with each other. Like that's true decentralization, and I think we're doing that here by opening up discussions like this, and being open to any conversation. For me, I know we did drift more towards ENF, and this is more around Eden, but ENF is correlated with Eden, so I don't have problems talking about that. And this has been an awesome conversation. Like I talked about, like, we're wanting to do a show and then having after open conversation, but right now we came in until we have more of an actual structured show. We will have more free flowing conversation, but stuff like this is I think super valuable, because everyone here can take a different perspective and outlook of what was been said, and start to think about things a little bit more, and this will drive and push us in the right direction, because we all want to win, and sharing concerns is very important as well, and talking about them. And I think we are right now taking steps in the right direction. And if Perry or anybody feels like there could be something that we need to take a look at, I always welcome all open point of views and critiques and so forth. So
Exactly,
Yeah.
Felix. That was what I was trying. If I can speak maybe now, make my points and continue without to be interrupted, that would be nice. And after I have to go. But what I will say, I am very happy of the accountability when someone is saying something and he take the responsibility of what he say. Like Perry, thank you very much for your points. And Chris and everyone here had made his points. That's nice. And we agree on something, seems to be, at least, that we just need to do the things, continue to do our contribution to this ecosystem, and not be focused on what is doing someone else. That doesn't mean that we are not interested about what the others are doing, but we should be very focused on Eden, because here it's about Eden, empowering Eden. Eden Fractal is doing so. I'm very happy. I was giving 500 EOS for that. And when I was doing that, that was not just about us to be blah, blah, blah. I will give 500 EOS. I was taking my accountability and saying, okay, I want to give that because I believe into this initiative going forward. Because in my opinion, in my view, if we are not collaborating more and trying to synergize with others and doing 1 + 1 = 3, we will be in a couple of months very disappointed because we will have waited and doing nothing. So now it's the time to do the things, not to speak too much, and do the things, come with proposals, and doing the things naturally week after week. That's the natural way for me. Personally, I am here since 2018, and I am doing every day what I have to do. And now that I see there is this Eden Fractal coming, very fresh new minds, new people, that's very encouraging to continue. So I think the sentiment now, it's for me a good sentiment, more synergies, more collaboration. It's what we need. And you can have 3 kind of mindset: a mindset to be an entrepreneur and do the things on your own and synergize with the people when you think it's the time. Or you can be a very good leader. We have many good leaders into this community. You can do the things at a level political, or you can just do the things. Personally, I don't think that Yves Larose was doing the things very political. He would just take the responsibility and all what he is able to do a better EOS, to go forward. He was not thinking about political and all this stuff. He was just taking responsibility. So that's personally what I want to do. And I am happy to be here with you guys. I'm sorry to have interrupted before, Felix. That was not intended. Okay.
Sounds
That's all.
great. Thank you. Thank you very much, Patrick. I appreciate your thoughts as well as Perry's and everybody's. A couple of things I'd like to say are, one, I have to get going in a couple minutes, but feel free, everybody, to continue the conversation. And then also, I think that these conversations are like really helpful, like Felix and everybody was saying, really like us just coming together and talking as a community and resolving issues, addressing concerns, figuring out the best path forward, and like really exciting solutions and possibilities. It's super helpful. It's a way that the community can improve by working together. And so I would also invite everybody to both come join these discussions every Sunday at 16 UTC to keep these sessions going, and then also join the Eden Fractal meeting on Wednesdays at 13 UTC. And I think that will also provide a lot of. But yeah, thanks but thanks everybody so much for all the great discussions, and please feel free to carry on. And thanks so much.
Yeah. So I think basically we'll go another 20 minutes. We'll wrap it up here at 1. So unless there's any pressing or anyone has any other like comments, I would like to go into basically another big topic I feel like would be cool to discuss. So yeah, I guess I'm gonna take silence right now as I'm gonna move forward with the next topic. So basically Wednesday, right, is our is the Eden Fractal meeting, and one thing that was proposed and what I'm kind of excited about, and I want to see this, so we're talking about accountability. I would like to see the chief delegates move forward with what they proposed to try to create an event here on Wednesday. So Wednesday being the Magna Carta that Brock Pierce brought up, it's historic for decentralization, and if we hold and host this event on the Eden Fractal and include the transitioning of keys, like the ceremony from the Fractally team over to the new chief delegates, and then if we, we got Chris here, and maybe we could reach out to some other of the previous chief delegates too. It'd be cool to have you guys on, and maybe, like I said, we all participate in the Eden Fractal, right? It would make sense. Everyone involved in Eden, it wouldn't hurt to come and get involved. and then yeah, we have the ceremony. And I think what would be cool too is, you know, I wish we could like, you know, I don't know what next steps are. I don't know if I should reach out to the chief delegates or what's going on with trying to make this an event on Wednesday. But one idea that I thought was, you know, we have this EOS distribution, right? That we're doing through the Eden Fractal. And if we host this event, I think a great way to get, you know, really turn this into an event, another historic event, because if we believe this is, you know, what we believe it can be, I just think it's awesome that it falls on the day that we had the Magna Carta. You know, the chief delegates could pool some funds and throw that in for like, that's what's going to go in through the distribution on Wednesday for attendance of the Eden Fractal. And then everyone can come to the table and discuss what their contributions towards Eden are. And we can kind of, you know, everyone can try the new system of the Fractally process for those who haven't tried it. And yeah, I think there's a tremendous opportunity to do something really cool. And yeah, I just wanted to kind of open discussion on thoughts on that. And if anyone, you know, may have a little bit more insight or I guess advice on what we should do to try to make it happen, because you know I really liked that the chief delegates mentioned it in their chief delegate meeting call, and to me I feel a little sense of like, well, I would like to see them deliver on that, and so that's kind of, I feel like, would be kind of holding them a little bit more accountable to the things that they're you know, basically producing by releasing these chief delegate meetings. And you know, I know that puts a lot of pressure, that puts a little bit more pressure, and everyone is busy. You know, I ran and I was a chief delegate like unofficially, and so like I try to think from that point of view. Like, you know, we're testing the unknown, and so I don't want to, yeah, I wouldn't have like really liked people like harping after me weekly, like, you said you're going to do this and you didn't. But you know, I think as we get more polished, which our current chief delegates are pretty polished, I would say, it would be nice to start to hold you know, the meetings and what's discussed and proposed a little bit more accountable as to, because I would like to know like why you know, if we don't have an event on Wednesday, why wasn't that able to, you know, kind of come to fruition? Because as of right now, I just think that, you know, it is a little last minute, but we could really, if we incentivize with EOS, we already have Eden Fractal community showing up. Doing the transition of keys on that date would be a really historic thing to do, in my opinion.
Totally. And as a Eden delegate level 1, and doing this Eden dashboard every week before Chris, or sometimes after Chris, we are doing a good job by republishing the chief delegate interview meeting. And I will be very happy to contact Chuck McDonald into the Telegram Eden delegates, chief Eden delegates. There is a Telegram group. I will be in contact with him, and I will try to do my best to advocating to come into this Wednesday Eden Fractal meeting. That will be very accountable for the chief delegates to join that also, because it's about to empowering Eden. So that's make totally sense for me, and I cannot guarantee that I will succeed. Maybe I will fail miserably, but I will try to not convince, but try to give the best argument in order that they join the force. We have to be more united, and yeah, totally, Felix, totally.
Felix, the ask is that they perform the ceremony on Wednesday. Is that the specific ask, or that they join just the meeting? I'm not clear on exactly what the ask is.
Yeah, so I guess at the very least, I think it'd be cool to have, yeah, the transition of keys. You know, Chuck had mentioned it in the chief delegate meeting that that is something that you know, we are hosting. So Brock basically proposed Wednesday to do the Eden or the key transferring, and then Chuck brought up that, you know, that's when we're hosting our Eden Fractal. So I guess my ask would be, it would be cool to see if the chief delegates came in and participated in the Eden Fractal, and we go through the process like normal, and then afterwards we have our after discussion. But during the after discussion is when we have, the ceremony, or maybe we could do the ceremony at the beginning. Whatever works best time wise to get the ceremony done, but then include the day with giving the option for everyone in attendance to participate in the Eden Fractal. To get involved and try the process once, because I don't know, there's just something there. It's cool to be able to go on your blocks.io and see that you got paid in EOS, and you've got the little Eden token in there. Like that's just the next step forward. Like this is kind of what you were saying, Perry, of like we'll hit like we've made it when basically people are able to come here and make an income through their contributions in Fractal, and this is the first step. Like
That was Doug. That was Doug that said that. I was repeating Doug.
Okay, yeah.
Right, that was Doug. Yeah, but I agree with Doug, and I agree with you that is our nirvana. That's our moment.
I think there's a way we can do it with education and information, because I feel as though the thing that we have valued here the most is a very eclectic assortment, a very highly intellectual people of different skill sets. And I want to see if there's a way we can actually tokenize or have the EOS or Eden token be supported by an educational system that involves mentorship and duplicating the knowledge base in other members, and improve dialogue and collaboration, partnerships with public and private institutions.
Yeah, that's what's exciting about I think Fractal communities too, is participating in online communities has helped, I feel personally, a ton too, as far as learning. You learn from the other people that you're engaging with, and so that natural mentorship is super powerful too. So we are onto something. That is my belief. That is why I'm here, and I'm excited. So, but yeah, so I guess
To me, it sounds like a great idea. It sounds like an absolutely great idea. It brings it all together in the community. It's a ceremony, but then there's an actual technical transfer, which is, I think, the core of it, and that's awesome. That there's an actual, cryptographic key transfer of power. That's at the core of it. That's awesome. But I'll tell you, the one thing that just kept ringing in my head when I've been watching the last Eden delegate meeting was what a tough spot those guys are in, and I'm just so happy I'm not doing that.
I know, that's what I was thinking too.
My God, they have no keys from the last work. They've got bylaws that they have to instantiate. They've got their own changes to bylaws that they want to do in the future. They've got no keys to do that. They have no control of their own social media accounts. They have no way to securely pass all of that information on to the next set of delegates. Those guys, that is an extremely capable group of people that I have 100% faith in their ability to execute. It's really an extraordinarily good group of individuals, but that's a tough spot. So if you can persuade them to do that on Wednesday, then you will be amazing. I support it 100%, but I'm not sure if they need extra parameters.
I agree, because they're only
Totally,
on a
Perry.
3-month term,
And
right?
it is for this reason we have a lot of some peoples, not a lot of, unfortunately, but some people that are behind Michael O'Sullivan, that are beyond Chuck McDonald and Gracie Lau and Edgar Fernandez. So those people are following and they are pushing, and thanks to those people, because if those people would not be behind, we will have a pain into this current mandate, because it's very short mandate, and we need to do the things very rapidly. So for this Wednesday, it's tomorrow and Tuesday and Wednesday. So that's very rapid, but that's a challenge. And we will do our best for that day come on Wednesday. And
Are you involved in that? Are you involved in that, Patrick? Is that what you're saying? Patrick? Hello, Patrick? I guess we lost Patrick, or did we lose me?
Yeah, we can hear
You're
you,
still there,
Perry.
Perry, but Patrick, I think he lost his audio again. But yeah,
That
Patrick's been
happens to
very
Patrick a
involved with the
lot.
event
A
on
lot.
Wednesday. Yeah, it's true.
Patrick gets cut off a lot like that.
Yeah, I guess he's calling from France. Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, he has been involved with the Eden Fractal, so you know, I think at least kind of, I guess the way I took it is he's gonna reach out, and you know, I mean, this is what's cool is like I think announcing kind of like plans and seeing if any, because if this event gets launched, right, you know, those are things that's a topic to talk about your contribution towards, you know, Eden, especially if this is a bigger turnout too, and you know, that in that moment is held of a higher respect, because it without that, you know, the event wouldn't take place. Like, you know, Dan Singjoy, he was number one in his well, actually we were in the same breakout room because we just had 2 breakout rooms, and he was number one because it was his initiative of putting this together that was valued the most, and it was tough because we had James Mart too working on the smart contract, which is super valuable as well, but it was like who put it together, like to where, like, I mean, we're all working together, right? But like it's like because his actions is what led to the event itself. That was valued higher that week as well. So, yeah, I guess that's kind of where I think, hopefully Patrick and will get involved. And yeah, I'm gonna try to reach out to some of the chief delegates as well. I am curious to hear too, since you know, we have a past chief delegate, Chris, still with us, to see, you know, if that's something that you were like, what your plans were, if you were going to try to get involved. And you know, because I do think it would be cool to have the past chief delegates a part of that ceremony as well, if the ceremony did take place, given that like really it should be you guys, your keys being transferred over to them. But since like that this has been like kind of like a long-standing issue of like how to transition ownership rights of the, like, basically all of Eden's, like, so to speak, assets, like, over to the new chief delegates. Starting this initiative right here, I think is super a great initiative led by the current chief delegates of establishing, you know, things down the road of you know, having that ceremony and then making it easier and seamless from transition, so the chief delegates can focus, given that they only have 3 months to go about their term, to start worrying and accomplishing other goals and tasks, instead of, you know, having to spend, you know, a majority of the term trying to get ownership rights.
Right. Going back to what, again, like what Chris said, the focus should be on Eden, getting Eden's house in order, getting that thing functioning smooth, which will lead me to a point that I'm going to make, which I love doing in the last 5 minutes, but it relates completely to that, in that I believe the process of Eden should be, as a design principle, because that's what we're doing right now. We're designing Eden as a design principle to make it as simple as possible as an organization. Now, right now, there's a lot of, you know, we're talking about member services and circles and marketing and tech and all these different functions that relate to Eden. And of course, all that stuff needs to happen. It won't exist. We won't be able to get where we need to go unless we have those things in place and happening. The point I want to make is, what is the relationship between Eden itself, the election process itself, the delegates themselves, as they transition in and out of power, and those circles, those services? And what I want to suggest, and I would love if this, what resonated through the community, but unfortunately, I'm just going to have to bring it up over and over again. I believe is that we should create loosely coupled relationships. So in software, you have this concept of loosely coupling or tightly coupling pieces of software, components of software. So if Patrick did rejoin us, so he's listening to me. So he's familiar with this idea that you can either loosely or tightly couple things. And I would like to suggest that we loosely couple all of these circles and all of these services, and that they don't depend on the chief delegates managing those things or even having an in-depth knowledge. They should have, of course, a good knowledge, a working knowledge of what's going on, but they don't need to be, they don't need to have a skill level or skill set that would require them to be able to manage those things, to be able to manage the tech, to be able to manage the marketing. I think they should be decision makers, consensus makers, communicators, and those kinds of individuals should be in those seats. And so what does a loosely coupled service look like? It looks like a service that is completely independent and that the chief delegates are deciding to fund or not to fund, and how much and for how long. Those are the decisions of the chief delegates, not management or employment contracts or anything else like that. It's just, do we contract this company for how long and for how much? We keep it extremely simple and allow the chief delegates to be elected on their ability to make those kinds of decisions, and not just because we need these kind of things. Otherwise, you're just going to get guys like Patrick and I, who do have the ability to manage those in those positions, which isn't a terrible thing. It's not a terrible thing, and you definitely want people like that. But you want to mix. You want a mix of people, and you want to keep it open to people who may not have all that technical depth to be decision makers. And that's my point. And I think that the way you do that is that you loosely couple. You use this design of loosely coupling the member services or these circles, these contracts essentially, to Eden, and they're not tightly coupled. They're not part of Eden. And the other reason is, and this may be the most important, is that it prevents the deep state. And the deep state is a problem, and I can see it already creeping into Eden. I can see people wanting to have like a long-term, behind-the-scenes relationship with the entity of Eden that doesn't really get the same scrutiny, and it's not really competing anymore. And you've got these people that are always there, and they're the ones making the decisions, and the politicians just become figureheads. Everything that Dan has done, the entire focus of More Equal Animals, is to combat corruption. And this is an attack vector, just like the collusion of political parties. The deep state is just another attack vector, and I think we need to recognize that and design for that in mind. So thank you for letting me go to the absolute end of the meeting.
Yeah, thank you for that, Perry. To answer Felix, you did ask me a question, so I'll get a chance to respond to that. And that's about the event on Wednesday that I think we were trying to figure out. So back to that, I don't think that meeting, like that whole thing, is irrelevant if the permissions are not actually transferred from the Clarion team. It'll be another just purely symbolic thing with zero teeth, similar to the time spent voting for Eve, which I also think was a complete waste of time because it was 100% symbolic and it took a lot of time. Time is short on these meetings between these guys. So that thing on Wednesday is irrelevant if we don't have the Clarion team on board to transfer permissions. Another thing, just it sounds nitpicky, but we want to sound as knowledgeable on this as an Eden organization as possible. No one is transferring keys. Keys are not moving. It's permissions. So like, for example, Brandon Fancher, his keys are currently on the active Eden account. He's not giving his active and owner key to that account to someone else. He's not giving his keys to anybody. He's transferring permissions. So I think we want to use the proper language there to make sure we convey what's actually happening.
Right, because everybody has their own keys, and if those don't change, then they'll still have access. Yeah, it makes total sense.
On your point, Perry, with what Eden does and in terms of the CDs and their involvement with the circles, my view is that the chief delegates should be appointing and selecting the leaders of those circles. I think there's an appointed leader who takes charge of project managing. Someone needs to take charge. This idea of this decentralized holy grail it's just not practical. You got to have a Kanban board. You got to have somebody running meetings. You got to have someone's got to take that charge. And I think the Eden chief delegates should be the ones who select who takes the charge. But that's the end. They don't make any decisions within the circle. They provide guidance and they select leadership. And that gives them some teeth. Because otherwise, we want to give Eden CDs some sort of value and some teeth in EOS as an ecosystem. That's a way to do that.
Now, specific individuals or their organization, which they happen to be leading.
Eden is comprised of individual, so you wouldn't, it'd be the individual, of course. And it's also, the question comes to Eden assets. So some individual, a human, has to take ownership, custody of the Eden assets. You did reference the Twitter that has been difficult to get. So that ownership of asset should be something that the chief delegates choose the individual. And the other thing that we spoke about, some of us, is the idea of a bond. So if you're going to assume control of an organization's asset of the Eden Twitter account, you would be selected by the chief delegate. So at some point they need to have the keys themselves, but then they hand them out, like I guess keys in this case probably would fit, account permissions to the various socials. And then whoever says, hey, Michael, for example, says, you know what, I'd like to be in charge of the Twitter. But in order to do that, because the questions come up, what do they just run off? That argument's always been used to say, hey, yeah, sure, you give it to somebody, but then they fuck off with the asset. What are you going to do about it? Well, nothing. But if they post a bond, then at least maybe there's some restriction or disincentive to have the asset just become co-opted by the person who was given the authority to control it.
Yeah, basically collateral.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, no, cool. No, okay, so real quick, yeah, I agree with the thanks for, that's something I need to learn to do better as I start to dive more in and learn the technicals. I want to be making sure that I'm announcing things correctly. I think transitioning of keys, I'm not sure if I picked that up in some of the lingo from the chief delegate, so I was just kind of, I guess, re-saying what I had heard, but
they use the wrong term as well. So this is small nuance. I'm not trying to nitpick. Language is always confusing. I just wanted to correct that.
That's definitely worth noting. One I guess quick note on that one is like, for me, I might do this on an EOS Fireside chat at some point. I think if our ticker symbol is staying EOS, I think it's good to say EOS instead of EOS or EOS. Just marketing wise. But anyways, going back to the main point though, as far as like being all for naught. So James Mart did say that he reached out to he is the Fractally team. And so he said that they would be on board with being able to do the transition on Wednesday. So yeah, we can actually, make it an official. I agree. It doesn't need to be a show. It needs to actually happen to make it significant. And so that's what I would like to hope for to see on Wednesday.
If they're on board, then let's make it happen, because that's all we need. Really, it's about them. So that's awesome. Maybe like, could someone throw up like a chat in the Eden members and just tag all these relevant people and say, hey, rumor has it that the Fractally team's willing to do this. CDs. Let's shit or get off the pot here. Let's organize this. So we doing it. I do it. I'm outside sweeping grout into my pavers here. So if someone else could do it, maybe that would be a good way to try to kick this off. Instead of PMing it, let's just make it public. That gets the most attention and the most eyeballs.
Hey, if anyone says anything,
That will give better discussion into the Eden Telegram group that we see now. So if we are tagging the chief delegates now about what we are doing, that will make a better engagement and better discussion that we have currently into the Eden.
Exactly.
And we all agree to like it. Everybody here, everybody likes it, so it gets attention.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, no, I will hop in there if anyone wants to post something, and then I'll put my thoughts in there as well and do that. Yeah, that'd be cool. you know, I haven't been super big on Telegram, but I do realize that is where our main communications are too. So yeah, I'll head over there and try to open the discussion about this over there and see what happens.
Go, 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 Felix.
All right. Well, I think that's actually a good way for us to probably wrap this up. I appreciate everyone here who came and you know, fascinating discussion, and I look forward to continuing this, and you know, you guys have made me kind of rethink about how I want to structure this show, because like it was fascinating discussion. You know, Dan, if you have any last thoughts that you would like to do before we wrap this up.
Yeah, I'd just like to say thanks so much again, everybody. And I really enjoyed all the discussions, and I think that is really helpful. So thank you. And then I hope to see you all next week at the same time, the town hall, and then also on Wednesday at 13 UTC for the second Eden Fractal event, and then also hopefully the key, or not key, permission transfer event too. So yeah, thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Man.
great conversation, everyone.
Thanks for letting me share. Appreciate it.
Yeah, it was fun.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you, man. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you guys. I'll catch you guys later.
Oh,
Bye.
and it was productive too, I think. Not only just fun.
Absolutely. Fun and productive. All right. See you guys later.
Yeah,
Peace.
baby.
Have a good day. Yeah, baby.
Bye. Oh, fuck.